If we haven't met yet, I'm Bria Johnson, our campus missionary here with the Every Nation campus, also known as ENC. And this is our mission together to bring the gospel to the college campuses in our city. And we're currently an official chapter at TCU. By the way, a big congratulations to our 6 seniors from TCU that graduated yesterday, our 1 senior, Adam, who graduated from Paul Quinn. We're so proud of you guys, and truly you are the future leaders of our world, of our city, our state, but also within our church. And so we're so proud of you, and we're so thankful for you. Okay, let's see how we do. Finish this sentence. Favor ain't Oh, free. Never heard that one. Okay. But yes, favor ain't fair is how the saying goes. It's like a little funny saying that we throw around in church circles, or that we like to bring up when, for instance, you get the last parking spot in the parking lot, despite running 10 minutes late, right? Or maybe it's when you order at Starbucks, right? And the barista accidentally gives you a venti. That's the largest that they have instead of the tall that you ordered. And you just didn't say anything because, favor ain't fair. Got a venti now. Or how about when the person who, bought your lunch when you forgot your card says, don't even worry about paying me back, right? I don't know if you really had it anyway, right? But, you feel a little richer now. Now we toss around this phrase, favor ain't fair, right? And, it's like this, with any little old thing, right? This idea that favor isn't fair. And it seems to be true, but not in this kind of flippant way that we throw it around, right? The favor of God is actually so much more serious and sobering than our silly saying encompasses on the surface. After all, in the Bible, people who were looking down the barrel of fear and death, or had been through significant hardships and challenges in their life, were those that were said to have found favor with God. I was reading this article and it really resonated me when she said it's not fair, it's his favor. But I think we've gotten it wrong. Maybe not the phrase itself, but our use of it. Favor really isn't fair, but not in the way we might have thought. The favor of God might not look like easy access. It might look like hardship after hardship after hardship, all intended to build the character required to carry the blessing bestowed upon you by the favor of God. Job was favored by God. Is his story really one that you want to emulate? Nope, no thank you, says the author. I'll take the double portion, but not the struggle that he endured to get to it. Or consider Mary. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." And what was Mary's response? Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Guess what this tells me, she says. Favor might feel like fear sometimes. After her angelic encounter, Mary had something to do, and now luckily God helped her out with this, showing up to her betrothed in dreams and providing explanations that no one would believe if they'd come from the mouth of a teenage girl. But throughout Scripture, the favorite of God endured countless and unimaginable trials. And from what I can tell, unfair advantage feels more like unfair hardship. It sounds a bit like our friend Esther. If you've been with us the past 4 weeks, you may recall that we're in this series called Such a Time as This, and we're taking a look at the book of Esther. And though this book is famously recognized as the book of the Bible that does not, at least explicitly, mention God's name, we've seen that God's hand is obviously all over this story in the rise of Queen Esther, wife of King Xerxes, in a time of pagan rule and great threat to her Jewish people. And through this imperfect yet obedient woman and her imperfect cousin, guardian Mordecai, God orchestrates and executes a divine and actually salvific plan. Our journey in the book of Esther started with a perverse pagan king, Xerxes, whose inappropriate demand of his former queen and wife Vashti and her refusal to comply resulted in her banishment from the kingdom, right? Then, through a sort of twisted beauty pageant, he gathers a bunch of young women, and young Jewish woman Esther becomes his queen. More interesting things ensue, but God's providence and sovereignty seem to keep Esther and Mordecai safe and in good standing with the king so far. However, he did have a really evil right-hand man, Haman. And Haman, irritated that Mordecai refused to bow down to him, ordered not just Mordecai, but the entirety of the Jewish people to be destroyed. And last week, Joyce beautifully brought us the word, and we left on this cliffhanger. After Mordecai appealed to Esther, you have to do something about this. And after much thought, and even the fear of death and consequences of being found out as a Jew, Esther decides to try to appeal to the king on behalf of her people. She calls for prayer and fasting and says that if I perish, leaving us at a point of tension. And so here we are today in chapters 5 through 6 as the plot thickens. Now, I just said chapters 5 and 6, that's a lot of ground to cover, okay? So as we move along in the story, I'll paraphrase a few things, and you can look at the screens to be able to follow along with me. You're welcome. We will not read all that together at one time. There's so many details in this story, and that's the whole point of what we're talking about today. But God is in every single detail, so just watch close. So after the dramatic end of chapter 4, if I perish, chapter 5 starts on day 3 of the fast Esther called for. On that day, even though she knew she'd be risking being put to death for approaching the king without being summoned, she still goes to him. Now, not knowing what could come, she prepares herself accordingly and faithfully takes this step. There was fasting, there was prayer, but alongside that spiritual preparation, she put on proper royal attire, carefully and skillfully dealing with the king. I mean, he had just literally banished his last wife while trying to humiliate her and for her not responding. So, Esther had to be wise now. But when the king saw her, the scripture says that she won favor in his sight. And he held out his golden scepter, accepting her approach and sparing her from being killed. But what does it mean that Esther won favor in his sight? So we talked about favor a little bit, but this Hebrew word for favor, I'm so thankful that no one's really close enough to hear me try to say hin. Okay, hopefully that went well for the front row. This is the grace freely bestowed upon Esther. It's more than just this royal courtesy that he's giving her, but it shows us this divinely given heart posture that the king now has towards her. So she's extended his golden scepter, and it's an undeniable sign of the king's acceptance of her. And instead of judgment that seemed like it was impending for her, Esther is actually welcomed. What seemed like potential wrath actually turned into mercy for her. She's permitted to walk forward to speak to the king. She's untouched by guards, illustrating what we find in Psalm 5, that you surround him with favor as with a shield. This grace, this delight from the king was like a shield around her. It was as if, even though she felt like she was walking straight into a fire, she was not burned. She wasn't scathed. Whether Esther realized it or not, as she moved forward in obedience, God was actually working behind the scenes to make it all happen. He was in every detail because he is the God of the details. Have you ever been there in your own life? Have you ever been in those moments where you prepared so much? You dotted all the I's, you crossed all the T's, you did all the research only for it to feel like somehow everything went really well. You didn't even need the things that you prepared, right? Something miraculous happened despite everything that you had done. I know I have. Flashback to January 2024. I had just moved to Fort Worth in August 2023, but I was a little back and forth for a while, went on a mission trip, settled in, and it was really about, after the holidays, about January, where we're looking up and I'm like, okay, how do I, get started here as a campus missionary and in the campus ministry role here now? At that time, I had been a campus missionary at the University of Texas in Austin for 6 years. And this is a huge public school. If you don't know, it has over 50,000 students. I don't even know, that might be more now, but it's a huge public school. There's some rules and regulations, but not really any that made my job, to bring the gospel there really that hard. Then I get to Fort Worth, and the main school where we had some things going on at was TCU. Okay, way smaller, right? Different campus, and all we had was a student and a few of her friends, an amazing student, Joya, that's who it was, right? But no campus missionary and no official student organization. Now God can do anything, but we wanted to try to see if we could make these happen. And so Pastor Alvin gives me this rundown of how the campus is, right? The situation. It's a small private school, 10 to 12,000 students, I think, 10,000 undergrad or so. Many, many, many rules and regulations, especially about guests on campus and organizations on campus. And I'm a rule follower. So I'm like, bet, okay, accept the challenge. We're learning all these rules and regulations. We can figure this out. We're going to be there. It's going to be fine. But I was also, a little scared. I'm seeing all the fine print and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to happen for us. And then Pastor Alvin had this connection with the department that we actually needed to appeal to, right? That we needed to work with in order to be present on campus as ENC. So I prepped, I planned, I wrote out all my notes in my journal, I prepared all the things. I knew in and out who ENC is, who we are, why we need to be on this campus, right? What this campus is about, all the different things. I learned about the people that I was meeting with, and I walked into the meeting kind of scared, but just doing what I felt like was the next right thing to do. And honestly, I didn't feel like I even got to say much. I wrote all these notes out, but I was in that moment where it's like, okay, like I prepped for what? Like what's going on? Like my prep and planning didn't super matter. And actually, they asked me just really one question a little bit, and they asked me about myself, like my story, whatever. So I share my story with them, how I came to know Jesus on the college campus at UT through ENC, how I became, a campus missionary and went into ministry. And I felt like it was a little, not too great. I was really nervous. And I was like emphasizing things that I never emphasized. Like, why did I emphasize that part? Like, what's going on? Like, this is not going well. And from not too much said, what felt like shabby to me, not that great, all of a sudden, I had their trust. They loved me. And they were like, we think our students will love you too. And I'm like, do you even know me? Like, what's going on? I thought there was a process here. Like, what's happening? And I remember after Alvin and I catched up later, and I was thinking, like, I looked at him like, okay, was that weird? Like, what just happened? Like, what just happened? And it was favor. It was favor with God and with these people that he gave us, not because I prepped, not because I planned, not because I knew about TCU or them or what I was doing inside and out, but because God was intricately involved in all of the details. Who knows what kind of conversations they were having right before, and certain parts of my story spoke to them and said, you need to be here, right? I had no clue. It was not how I practiced, but it was how he wanted it to go. He ordained the meeting and he divinely orchestrated how all of it would happen, right? All he needed was our obedience to ask for an audience with what felt like the powers that be for us, and he took care of the rest. There were even other steps in this process after that moment that I thought, okay, surely this is it now. Okay, we had some grace, we were good, we had some favor, but it's going to stop now, right? Because like, how are we going to get over this next hoop? And then again, and again, God gave us favor in their sight, and he continues to do that for us. It felt like before we even entered the rooms, filled out the applications, did the things that God had already established our path. Why do I share a story like this? Why is God even bringing up maybe a story in your own life that you could think of where he did this for you? It's because he was working in ways that we couldn't see, right, for us. And he was probably working for you in ways that you couldn't see. I don't know what kind of step of obedience like this that you might need to take, but know this, that God is working in ways that you can't see yet. When you're stuck in limbo, maybe even fear, you're like, I don't even know how I can move forward, unable to really figure out, like, okay, if I do all this, like, what's the outcome going to be? Maybe even in that stuck moment, he's actually calling you right now in uncertainty, in fear, to move in obedience out of a trust in him, who is working out all the details that you can't see. And so Esther finds favor in the sight of the king like this. He's already orchestrated things in such a way that she's now queen, right? And the king asked her, what is your request? It shall be given to you, even to the half of my kingdom. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king. If you notice, if you remember, what Joyce talked about was the goal here, right? Was to talk to him about this decree that went out to destroy all the Jews. But she doesn't mention the Jewish people of Susa, Haman's plan to do this, or even her own Jewish heritage. Instead, she asked for the presence of the evil right-hand man to come for a feast, right? Esther, are you okay, girl? Like, what's going on, you know? But you know what? We know that she was fasting and praying. So I think, maybe there was a little method to the madness, or she was trying to trust God. And whether she was scared or not, I think she was actually probably just in step and walking in the wisdom of God and with God. Again, he's the one that's in the details. And so, of course, Haman is quickly called in. King Xerxes seems almost like putty in Esther's hands. This whole thing of, even up to half my kingdom, he probably may not have done that, but it sounded good to her, right? So he's like, whatever you want. And he tells her that whatever it is, it will be granted to you. And Esther says, my wish and my request, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. Now, wait a minute, Esther, I'm stressed now. We're in this story, things are heightening, and I'm stressed. I don't know about you, but it's not looking too good. I mean, Luther Vandross, he was stressed too about this. And then here goes the evil right-hand man, Haman, full in his belly, right? Esther's waiting for what? Like, what are you doing? And Haman walks out of the feast. He's like, yeah, I'll be back here tomorrow. Cool. He's happy. He's doing great until he sees Mordecai at the king's gate. And he's reminded of Mordecai's refusal to respect him, to bow down to him, right? To pay homage to him. And he's enraged all over again. He's in a fit. And he keeps his cool till he gets home. And then he talks to his friends, his boys, and his wife. And he reminds them of his greatness and riches, his standing with the king and in the kingdom. Kind of like, does anybody watch Sonic the Hedgehog, Dr. Eggman? Maybe you've seen the movies or you've seen the show, right? Going on and on and on about himself, taking over the world, doing what he wants to do, right? This is what Haman is doing. It's about himself and his evil, right? And he says, even Queen Esther let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared. And tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. So he has all that one could want in the kingdom, right? But his ego and his pride and his selfishness want even more. The evil within Haman's own heart, right? He was the epitome of what we see in Genesis 6:5, that the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Apart from God, Haman was stuck in his evil and his selfish ways. And his hype squad, those around him that are supporting him, they tell him, why don't you just make a wooden stake for Mordecai to be hanged on and die? And then just go about your night, go to the feast, do your thing with the king. And he was like, yes, Immediately I will make that weapon and we will do it. Now this is getting pretty dark, okay? He just went on about himself. He's angry, right? And they're like, yeah. Kill that man. What? Okay. Things feel like they've gone a bit far, but I mean, this is the man who said destroy all the Jews, not just Mordecai, but all the Jews, right? And he says, you know what? I'm not even going to wait for the king to really know about my decree, for him to approve it, right? I'm going to take this into my own hands and we'll kill Mordecai first, right? One of our protagonists, we feel like, okay, we're watching this story, he's about to die. Like, what's going to happen to him? Esther, supposed to be our girl. Like, how could you let this happen? How could you delay? Why would you wait? What exactly was going through your mind? Matter of fact, what about you in your own life? What have you been waiting for? When were moments that God actually asked you to wait for something? Maybe you didn't understand why. Maybe it didn't make total logical sense, but there was a pause in your soul, a lack of peace within you that prompted you to be still and to wait. Or maybe you sense that you're in that place right now. Him asking you to pause, to wait on the things that you desire, right? I've been there before too. Feeling so close yet so far from what it feels like God is calling me into, right? Why am I not there yet? Why don't we have this thing yet? Why is this thing going wrong in my life? Why do I have to wait? Sometimes I feel personally like I get glimmers of what he wants me to do in my life. I'm like, ooh, thanks God for that vision. Okay, looks pretty good. Like, I'm ready to be there right now. And I try in my own way, in my own might. Like, okay, let's make the plan. Let's make a strategic map. What's going to happen the next 3, 6 months, 12 months, 15 months, so we can get to where we need to be, right? But I try to get there in all the ways faster than what he wants while he's telling me to wait. And even sometimes my own narrow mind moves forward without him. And that cost me even more delay, even more stress, because I couldn't see the bigger picture. Only he could. God can divinely prompt you, or he can divinely delay you, but his way is better in the end. I don't know how all the details in your life are working out right now. I don't know if you're looking at it like, yeah, this is pretty good. This is about the timeline I was thinking, or if there's some things left to be desired. But just know that he has created space and time. He's created the entire universe, and he knows how all things are going to work together in the end, right? He sees so much than you ever could, than I ever could, and he's just asking you and I to trust that he knows and that he sees these things. But wait, pun totally intended, then enters in this unmentioned but ever-present God of the delay. The scripture says that that night, the king couldn't sleep, right? Have you had a sleepless night or two, or you get in bed and you're like, all right, we're ready to relax, and all the thoughts come to your mind. Like, these are all the things I need to do tomorrow and the next day and whatever else. And Xerxes has this sleepless night. So he asked his attendants to bring him some of the most exciting reading ever, the Kingdom Chronicles, literally written down the goings on of the kingdom. This person did this, and then we did that for them. Obviously, because, he didn't have a sound machine back then, so I guess he was just like, or audiobook. So he was like, let's just put on something boring, and, we'll get to sleep. So just, some light reading before bed. But through this, he actually ends up hearing that Mordecai had ratted out the king's former attendants, Bigthana and Teresh, which, Pastor Alvin lovingly called them Big T and Little T. Anyway, if you don't remember, they were the ones who actually plotted to kill the king several years before this. So this is the first time that the king is hearing about this. He's like, hold on, wait. He's falling asleep and he's like, wait, go back to that one part. Like, what happened? Who is this? Mordecai prevented the king from dying because he stood up and said these things. Now, this makes me think, like, have you ever been in those moments where you're like, I don't know why I need to do what's right in the eyes of God, but I have to do it now. And you're like, you don't see anything from that, right? Mordecai didn't see anything happen for years, right? And then all of a sudden, at just the right time, the king is hearing about what he has done. And the king says, "What honor and distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" The king's young men who attended him said, "Nothing has been done for him." And after all, Persian kings like him were known for rewarding those who served him in a great way. And so this was a scandal in his eyes. Like, okay, like, sleepless night, like, we need to figure this out, right? But there was this divine delay, the timing of Esther not asking for what she really was going there to ask for, right? And then it creates space for the king to have a sleepless night. But then also Mordecai years ago did this thing, and now it's all coming back together. Divine. And he was wide awake now. Like, okay, we've got something to do. God moves through this sleepless night. And then the king must have heard a stirring in the court, because it turns out to be none other than Haman. Here he goes, running into the court. He's excited. He's eager to talk to the king about having Mordecai hanged. Meanwhile, Esther was like, "I haven't been summoned yet. I don't know what to do. I might die if I go to the king." And Haman, his right-hand man, says, "Whatever, I'm coming in the middle of the night, okay, to get what I want to be done." Because Xerxes wasn't the only one up all night, right? Haman's tore up. He's upset. We saw how Esther wisely prepared. But here he goes in the heat of the moment, walking into the king's court and his presence as he wishes. But as soon as he's let in, the king asks him, what should be done to honor the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman goes, "Oh, who? Me? Me, right? Because who could the king possibly want to honor besides himself?" Okay. And he tells him what he thinks he should do. Hint, hint, the things that he would like to be done for him, for himself. Royal robes, the king's finest horses and attendants with a crown, a parade about town to proclaim his greatness and his honor, what he's done for the king. And Xerxes says, yes, that's it. That sounds perfect. Do exactly this for Mordecai, the Jew. And Haman says, who? Mordecai, the Jew? The timing of all this, it's like a movie at this point. I'm seeing the memes. I'm like, oh my gosh, as I'm reading it over and over. And so Haman, he does as the king wishes if he wants to remain who he is, right? He has the finest things, all the things that he wanted, brought to Mordecai and leads him about the city, proclaiming that he is owed honor. Now, you know, that was the saddest that that Haman has ever looked, walking with Mordecai being like, yeah, this is the guy who did the thing, and the king honors him. Oh, new people, okay, repeating it again. It's terrible for him, right? But the tables have turned. Mordecai didn't even have to ask for honor and power to be bestowed or given to him. There's that unmerited grace again. There's that favor again. You see, Haman trusted in the rolling of the dice, right? In the lots. He treated that as kind of this it determined how he would do and how things would go in his life, right? The casting of lots, the way the dice rolled, how we think of it, to tell and to shape his own fate. But the lines for Mordecai had somehow fallen in pleasant places, like we see in the song. So just as land was surveyed in ancient Israel and allocated by lot or by chance, right? That's what determined things. The psalmist here, David, recognizes that his life, his circumstances, and location have been determined by God's deliberate grace in his life. This is where Mordecai is. God determined where the chips would fall for him because he was the God in the details. So Haman, with his tail between his legs, huffing and puffing and mourning, his hood on his head, he goes home to tell his boys and his wife how everything went down. He's just upset, okay? He's upset, he's going on. He's like, this is what happened. He's throwing a tantrum. And they're totally supportive, right? When they say, if Mordecai, that's him, yes, throwing a tantrum. And they reply to him. They're like, oh, we see you're upset. And they say, well, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, surely fall before him. So loving, so supportive. I guess just real. The people before who said, yeah, this is the time. You're going to take what's yours and you're going to kill Mordecai. Now they're like, I don't know what's really going to happen. The chips aren't falling in the right place for Haman, and his fortune turns. The next day, he's brought to the feast, and this is how the section of Esther ends. We end chapter 6 with that. Just that, okay, that happens. His friends and his wife say that to him, and he goes to the feast. The God of the delay here divinely uses what feels like this lull in the story, like what's kind of going on, to actually move it along, right? In a really quick and like, oh my goodness, how are all these things happening at the same time, to actually move his ultimate plan further along? What can we learn from this? What can we see in this from how Esther waits and the things happen and the chips fall the way they do? She doesn't rush things, but she moves obviously in a wisdom and a power that only God could have given her. It allows her to be culturally sensitive, aware of how the power structures in her society and the kingdom function. And even though these may have been out of line with her faith, God's law, which she might feel should really happen as a Jew, she moves in wisdom with God and she leverages her knowledge of the culture surrounding her, right? The same goes for us. In a world that's post-Christian, right? I was just talking to someone the other day about, I tell certain churchy jokes and people do not get it. Have you tried that? And you're like, oh yeah, favor ain't fair. One person answers, oh, okay, wow, we're post-Christian now, okay? We are challenged in this, right? We're in the state of Texas. We're in Fort Worth, Texas, where there seems to be a little bit of religiosity, but no one really knows what they're talking about. Half the things we say aren't even in the Bible, right? So we have to understand what kind of society we're in, that there's no longer a Christian awareness, right? We meet people where they are. We understand the dynamics and the culture around us, right? And if he says go, if God says go and move in wisdom, we go and we're guided by him. If he says wait, we wait. If he gives us details about a situation or about a person, we follow those things. We may not know every outcome in the end. How are all these things going to work out? And evil and brokenness in this world will still challenge us, might still hurt us, just like Esther didn't know what Haman would do, right? What his plot would be. But what feels like slow in your life may actually be strategic, ordained by God. We actually know, those of us in this room who say that we're Christians, we know the God of the details. We know that God is working in ways that we can't see yet. We know the God who perfectly prompts and perfectly delays us in his timing. Though his presence sometimes may feel hidden from you, like you can't really see what he's doing, maybe it seems like a mystery to you, you can walk in wisdom with him. That compass, it's like a compass that he gives us, right? You look at the book of Proverbs, wisdom literature in the Bible, and you're like, I'm looking to this to tell me exactly what to do, right? Because you want a GPS. You open up Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever else. We don't even print out MapQuest anymore and, see what happens. We don't even look at maps anymore. We're relying on our phones to get every single step and update when we go the wrong direction, right? That's the kind of thing that we want with the wisdom of God. We want to know step by step, how are these things going to go? But unlike a GPS, we may not know the way to the destination step by step, the way God wants to do it. But he gives us the ability, this compass of wisdom, to kind of know what direction to go in and where to go and how to trust him in the middle of that. This is the wisdom and guidance that God gave Esther, the same that's available to all of us today, given to us by the God who is in the details, by the God who sees the things that we don't see. Now, I told the story earlier about my transition to Fort Worth, right? And I get into this room with the big people, and it's like, okay, like somehow they end up loving me. I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. But well before that, for about at least 2 years, I was really struggling. I was in ministry, I had been, but I reached the place where, my therapist was like, if you don't stop now, you're gonna burn out. Then I take 3 weeks off and I realize on day 2, I'm already burnt out. That's what already happened. And I was struggling with a lot of different things, trying to understand different things in my life. And I come out of the season, with some different transitions that happened, and I'm trying to make my way through. And I saw that the Browns had moved to Fort Worth, right? Loved Pastor Alvin. Like, we kind of knew each other from work in Austin, but not super personally yet. And I contacted him and I said, hey, you've done transition before. I've been feeling for like maybe 2 or 3 years that I'm in kind of this transitionary moment. I just had a transition happen that felt like it wasn't of my own doing, but God really just made it happen. And I need help. Like, can I talk to you? Can we meet like once a month? And he's like, yeah, sure. Like, we'll meet virtually, all those things. Little did I know, we would grow in relationship. He would give me advice. I'd be talking through the different things I'm thinking about. I'm telling him, okay, I feel like this is what God's doing in ministry. I feel like this might be next. I'm inching closer and closer and closer to what it feels like God has for me. And I get to the end of that school year, that year, and things are just going bad. I'm like, okay, like we're doing fine. We're on our way up. And all the things are going wrong. I'm talking my housing situation was falling apart. My roommates moved out. I felt like I had perfect people like coming in, especially one of my friends. And it felt totally unexplainable that she didn't want to live there and she went to go find something else. She had been complaining about how she wanted to live super close to campus the whole time and then chose like something 45 minutes away. Like crazy stuff like that where you're like, you just said you wanted, like, why does any of this make sense? Those are the kinds of things that started to happen in my life. Money wasn't adding up. There wasn't enough in the bank. Everything was feeling like it was going left in my life. And that's when I finally felt like, okay, I'm really drowning. A God? Like, are you around somewhere? Like, what's going on? And it's like for the first time, I kind of look up and realize, wait, I've been praying. I've been asking God, would you show me in different ways in my life? Would I be able to see the direction that you're taking me? But I was seeing all these things happening. I'm like, whoa, why is everything on fire? Like, how do we put all these things out when those were the things that he was trying to get me to see, to show me that maybe I wasn't supposed to live in that house. Maybe the grace for, what I was doing in that moment in that city was over. But it took all these things happening in the way that God wanted them to happen for me to look up and realize I've been meeting with Pastor Alvin, who's in Fort Worth at a church plant, doing things that I would really like to do and be a part of for like 8 months. And I'm like, oh, I'm actually meeting with him tomorrow. I feel like God's really doing something. Like, I feel like maybe he wants me to move. That feels scary. Like, I don't feel like I have enough money. I feel stuck. But as soon as I voiced that to Pastor Alvin, my leaders, there was relief. There was peace. Things were moving forward. I got an apartment here faster than I ever could. I felt like I had peace from God about being here faster than I ever would on my own. And slowly, all the chips, all the boundary lines started to fall in pleasant places for me. I raise monthly partnerships. If you don't know, Joyce and I, we're missionaries. And so people outside of this church give to what we do because they support and believe in what God's doing through us. I've been doing this for almost 9 years now, 6 years at the time. And I felt like I was really stuck. But as soon as I announced, like, hey, I'm moving to Fort Worth, this is what's happening, thousands of dollars were overflowing. More than I had ever seen in my life, God provided through ordinary people who wanted to see God's purpose and plan move forward in my life. Why do I share that story? Maybe it sounds like what you hope will happen in the end of your story, right? Maybe you feel like you're like, I don't know when this is going to happen, how it's going to happen, and when. And maybe God is trying to show you in little ways, but you need to trust him, right? To see how it all come together in the end. Because all these little coincidences, the things that seem to go wrong and go left in our lives, they're almost never just that. Just a coincidence. Oh, this just happened to happen. Is that what happened in Esther's story? When she delayed and then Haman came in with a plot and then God said, I'm going to make, King Xerxes not sleep and all these things are going to happen in this way. That doesn't seem like a bunch of coincidences. As the plot thickened in our broken world, even thinking beyond Esther, right? After that moment, God always had a divine plan to save it, to save not just them, but all of us, right? And while humanity continued to do like Haman what was right in its own eyes, God the Father actually created a plan to send his own son to us to make things right. This was a radical idea. God himself becoming a man in Jesus Christ and dwelling among us, doing what we do. Not exactly on anyone's bingo card, right? Especially at that time, people thought maybe they would just never be saved. The Jewish people kept getting conquered and conquered again, and maybe it's not happening. God had gone silent, and he seemed to delay for years to them. But it's just like Jesus, it's just like God to actually show up at the right time, right? And he drops into this moment in history. It may not have seemed like things were going well. They were under Roman occupation. There was a decree to kill all the firstborn sons, and Jesus is supposed to come into the world as a baby. But just like God reversed human plots to save his people in Esther's story, he reversed the plot of the enemy who aims to steal, kill, and destroy us and also our world. Esther risks death by bravely approaching the king to save her people, but Jesus was even greater than Esther, who literally tasted death for us in our place to save us from our sin, right? To save us from the things that would destroy us and be consequences and cause spiritual death in our lives. Someone like Haman expecting honor is forced to actually honor his enemy. But Jesus, God and royalty himself, is humbled unto death on a cross. In the end, he's the only one worthy. He's exalted to the highest place, turning defeat into victory. Even the Hamans of this world, the Hamans in your own life, will have to bow down to the one true King, Jesus. God's most gracious gift, his caress to us, his favor, the kin, is his only son, Jesus. And by him, we are actually rescued. From Genesis to Revelation to now, God was and is working in ways that we can't see yet. Because he's the God of the details. He bestows favor. He's the God of the delay, right? He prompts us when it's time. It's something I was reading about the book of Esther summed it up really well in saying that we need perhaps to develop a skill of reflecting more on the seemingly ordinary events of life to appreciate how God has been at work in our daily experience. So for you, who might God be giving you an audience with, favor with? What steps is he asking you to take in obedience? Where might God be prompting you, giving you influence with someone to be a blessing or a voice of reason or to move something along for his purpose? After all, God's favor, it often appears in the ordinary gestures that we do, right? Mordecai standing up and saying, this is not right, not knowing that years later God would come through. These ordinary things in our lives, they actually carry eternal weight. Saying hi to our neighbor, I don't know what impact that's going to happen or have on them, but our obedience, however risky it may feel, however uncomfortable it may feel, however much fear we have, that obedience can actually position us to experience God's divine intervention. Because even when it seems like he's not there, God's favor is active. It's changing hearts, it's changing times, decrees, all the details for us and for his redemptive purpose. All in all, we have to just avail ourselves to a heart posture of hope and of trust in God's commitment to us and to redeem and restore the world. And I hope you can let him do that today in your own heart. So let's go to him in prayer.